Okay, here's the deck tech, I guess. The first thing to talk about is probably the win condition in the main deck. I mean, I think it's pretty important to have a way to win the game. So, like, before Artist Talent was a card, people played 4 Shredder and 3 Spell Pierce. So, like, Shredder and 3 Pierce gave you a lot more meat in your deck, I guess. But also, that meta was consisted of like vampires and Amalia, so it was a less of a it was a more concentrated meta in that way. Um, or like it was like hot, those decks. Time Walk's not as good against them. I don't know. Um, but yeah, when you added talent, the deck got started decking itself much more easily. I also just noticed when I play the deck, like when you play talent, like literally the only card you care about, like once you resolve the first cruise is like a win condition. Because like let's say you play against Lotus Field or Incarnation or a control deck or the mirror match, you can draw your deck, but you literally don't do anything. I mean, this is anybody who played Phoenix like 2 years ago will already know all this, but the deck is like 30 cantrips, like unique cards that do stuff. So like you can play like other win cons, you could play like Profts or whatever, but I think it makes sense to play like a Time Walk and a Fork. It's pretty reliable, pretty good win con. Works with pick lock. Because like a lot of the other win cons, you can mill over easily. It's like very hard to mill over Time Walk. You could still mill yourself sometimes, but like having the one Time Walk will help a lot. Um, Other stuff. I guess it's not too much to say on 2 spell Pierce. I really like 3 Pierce before, but I guess it makes sense to play 2 if like there's not vampires in the meta and Amalia and stuff, I guess. I guess Dwari, like, skip ahead 30 seconds, I guess, for most people. Like, most people probably don't want to hear about it, but I think it's underrated. I mean, there's like a bunch of reasons. The first thing I would say is that, like, one of the powerful things about Phoenix is that the curve of the deck's extremely low, and that's actually good with tap lands. I think, like, people don't realize that. Because, like, what that basically means is, like, Phoenix is, like, usually pretty advantaged. It mostly loses when it's, like, flooding or, like Phoenix cards are like more efficient than the opponent's cards. So like most of the time you lose is when you can't use your card's efficiency. And like a lot of people might be like, well, tap land means it's less efficient, but like that just doesn't like matter. Like if your hand's good, it's just not a big deal to play tap land. But what's actually a huge difference is Phoenix really wants like a 2 to 3 land hand. Like 4 land hands are pretty bad in the deck. So like if you have 3 lands plus Jwari, it's just like unfathomably so much better than having 4 lands. And there's literally a deck called Demons that plays 4 Archfiend that's legal. Dwar was always a good answer to Fable. There's also just like other like if you like it's like the Rick and Morty copy pasta. Like if you really understand Phoenix, like also I don't know if people realize it, but Phoenix has like a much better late game than most decks. It's usually weak in the early stages of the game. So then again, people were like, "Oh, Jwari like makes your early game worse," but actually, it gives you more ways to like interact with your opponent on early turns. Like for example, Fable stuff like that, and bridge you to the late game and Archfiend. And I didn't even mention the fact that you can hit it with Pick Lock, which is huge. I mean, that's actually huge. It comes up literally constantly. And also like there's just so many other things. Like you can literally it triggers talent. So whatever. I mean, you don't need to play Jwari out. I think like not playing one is like probably just wrong, but you don't need to play 2. I mean, the other thing is that like the last lands you play are really bad, so that's another thing that's good about it. I guess I did notice that the blue-red lands are better with Artist Talent because you really don't want to play Reverglide on red, on turn 2, or like if you like, it's much better to have Spire Bluff, right? So that made like Stormcarved or Shivan Reef better. I will say about Sokinzan, I think it's probably bad because this deck plays 12 ops, like four consider like you know what I mean? Like putting a mountain in your deck with 12 ops is a pretty bad idea. I think that like if anybody played Delver, they would understand like basic playing like a non-blue land in Delver was like horrible because you literally always just needed like the blue mana to cast your cantrips, and this deck has even more cantrips. Soken Zan's obviously fine, you could play it, but it's just like it's very not free. I probably personally wouldn't play it. So that was the mana base. I guess I could talk about the bounce spell choice. I think about the burn 2, whatever. I'll talk about the bounce. So like 3 main bounce spells people play is like Borrower, Floodmaw, and Stern Dismissal. Thinking how to say this, like, yeah, I've always been pretty anti Borrower. I think Borrower is actually like extremely bad in the Phoenix deck. It's obviously a good card, but the reason I would say it's extremely bad is number one, it doesn't contribute to Delve. So like, you play Treasure, like if you play Borrower, you play a 2-mana card that doesn't put a card in your graveyard. So it's actually huge. The other thing is like the fact that it's 1 mana versus 2 mana is like huge. You know, like 1 mana versus 2 mana is always huge. That's the difference between Lightning Bolt and Lightning Strike. But in this deck, it's like even bigger than most because your entire deck is literally cantrips. Like going like turn 3 Artist Talent plus Floodmaw or Floodmaw plus Picklock, or just going like Consider Opt Floodmaw to return Arclight. Like the 1 versus 2 mana is just like so big in this deck. Luckily, I'm not playing Giganta because of Time Walk, so I'm not going to talk about the Giganta. Like, the main arguments for Borrower that are good are like people usually like it sounds mean, but it's actually kind of true. Like people are scared about decking because the deck has almost no threats. But you'll see, like I fit a lot of sneaky threats in here. Like Prismari Command is actually kind of helps you not deck. But yeah, like people mention they're scared of decking. I think people have like plans that I'm lower on. Like a lot of people against the black mid range deck try and play a lot of creatures like Third Pass and Borrower and stuff. And I actually think I might side out my profs against the mono black deck. The more I've been thinking about well, my current plan is to side it out. So like if I'm siding out profit against them, it's like much worse against them. And also obviously like if Narset's actually good, then obviously like Borrower's just like you need Flood Maw like for the Narset. And also like the other argument people make is like against control decks, they'll be like Borrower's bad in the deck, but it's good against like High Noon decks, which is like an okay argument, but like considering everything else I said, and I'm not, I would just play Flood Maw. And like I don't know if you need it, but there is a decent amount of like white decks in the metagame, and people are playing demons and stuff. So it seems okay to like cut some impulses, though it'll be bad sometimes. Regarding Lightning Axe, yeah, I feel this is another card people like don't understand that well. I feel like it seems to me that like people seem to think like Lightning Axe is a bad card that you don't want to play, but it's actually might be the best 1-mana removal spell in the format because the 1-mana removal is actually pretty bad in this format. Like the Fatal Push is really bad at getting Revolt. So like most of the 1-mana removal is bad in the format, but Lightning Axe is actually a 1-mana removal spell that can like trade up with a lot of things like you know what I mean, Shieldred or Magebane Lizard, or like people don't play it as much anymore, but people used to play more Lovestruck Beast. And like so like I guess what I'm saying is like I said before, like the weakness of the deck is the tempo. Like you're a better late game deck and usually lose on tempo. Like Lightning Axe gives you a lot of ways to blow out your opponent on tempo. Also, it literally like sometimes it heals Delve and discards Phoenix. And like this deck's always been low on actually Phoenix discard outlets. And now the new argument people will make is that, well, if you have Artist Talent, you have to discard a card. So like I don't know, I guess you could play 3-Axe if you wanted to. But I feel like if I have Talon out, then things are already going pretty well for me. And I don't know, like if you don't play the 3rd-Axe, you like almost have to sideboard it, or you start playing weird stuff like Chandra's Defeat. So, which isn't that bad, but anyway, yeah. I basically I think Axe is great. Then Fiery Impulse. I mean, Torch the Tower, I could speak about it a little bit, but I think that's another thing where I feel like people have confused plans deck. So like originally, like before Artist Talent came out, people would talk about Torch the Tower being good in the mirror, and I was always scratching my head because back then people played Force Shredder. So like it seems kind of bizarre to think that Torch the Tower is good when people play Force Shredder in the mirror. But now people play much less Shredder. So and so then Torch obviously, became much more reasonable in the mirror. But I also think it comes down to like the Wincons stuff. Like people are like, oh yeah, Torch is good because you can like deck them, but like Torch is like not good if your opponent has like any win, like can actually win the game in their deck. Like if your opponent like isn't gonna deck themselves, I don't think torching their Phoenix will be very efficient. Like very great play. I mean, it's fine. Like if you're in that stage of the game where both players are drawing the deck, it's like not it'll be fine. But I think that the Phoenix Mirror, like in the mid game, should just be about like who casts Time Walk first or whatever, and like the Torch is kind of whatever. I mean, Torch is an okay card. You could play it, Exile Sheep, but that's why I have 2 Anger. That's kind of my plan against during in a sense. That's most of the main deck. I mean, I probably should have said this at the start of the video, but I guess I'll just say it now. Like the biggest thing when Talent came out, like the biggest question was for me was how can it well, the 2 questions were like, how does it affect the tempo of the deck, and how does it affect the win conditions of the deck? Because like the tempo of the deck, like obviously like you remove Shredder, which is a card that has a lot of power and toughness and can block. So like your tempo gets worse in some ways. You can't rely on Shredder as a blocker. And then insofar as win conditions, like yeah, you remove the card that has power and toughness for another cantrip. So those were the 2 things I was considering. So yeah, I wasn't sure if you'd still want Picklock or not, but it seems fine to play Picklock with it. So I haven't like I played a little bit and I wasn't really having issues with that because also like historically Phoenix always played like about 4 cards that self-milled you, and now it's by 8, but it seemed fine to play both. That's my thought on 4 talent, 4 Picklock. And also, yeah, the Prof, I guess I didn't mention it earlier, but it just helps you not deck yourself. Like, it'll give you, like, if you play against, like, a Leyline Binding deck or what, like, it just gives you a lot of voice to actually, like, kill your opponent. So it's kind of like a third part. It's like one of the trifecta of the Wincons. Like, if you play against Lotus Field or something, you can just play a Prof on turn 6 and then you can actually kill them instead of just never doing anything. Um, then the sideboard, I guess I can talk about a bit. Yeah, 1 mana counters are good, so null's good. It's good in the format now, I guess. Against like the sack decks and incarnation and whatever. Yeah, I put a 3rd Floodmaw because this was the last card I put in the sideboard. It seemed like fine against high noon decks, and I can side it in against prowess, and it complements my Narset well and stuff like this. So it seemed fine to play 3rd bounce. It was like last card I added. The Prof is also kind of like not necessarily necessary, but it's kind of good when your opponent's trying to deck you. So if you play against like white controlling decks, like the enchantment deck or control, or like basically just like if you're playing or like if you just want to play towards Wincons, like against Lotus Field, I could see Prof being okay because it can pressure them. Those are the situations. But I'm actually, I realize I don't even think I want it against the black mid range decks because I might rather just play to the Planeswalkers. But yeah, it kind of helps you not deck, which is a pretty real thing with this deck. It's playing 30 cantrips. Like, if you play against control, probably their best plan is to try and deck you. Mystical Dispute definitely got worse with the artist talent, but and also counters artist talent, I guess. But I kind of see it like Dispel. Like the role I see of the card isn't that it's supposed to be some, whatever insane Giga card, but it's just a 1 mana counter spell that's good at protecting your spells. Like if you play against like the Mirror, you can go like turn 3 talent. If they try to null it, you have Dispute. It just seems, it's like Dispel to me, which is, I guess, for the Zoomers, counter an instant spell for 1 mana. So I just think that it just seems like a good card. I don't know. It's just good. Then I guess I get Planeswalkers last. Anger of the Gods, I thought it would be really good against green white. Like the way it just interacts with Enduring Essence is obviously really good. Because like every time they draw a card, you just like get exile that creature. And although you have a bunch of cantrips, so you're really good at finding it in the mid game, and they don't like have that many tools to deal with it. It just seems good. And I think it's better against the mouse deck than like people think, because the mouse deck is kind of like more mid-rangey than people think. I mean, they're just the way their deck is built is it's kind of hard for them to not have multiple creatures because they're playing Kumano. They play Manifold Mouse, and also like they're trying to attack you quickly. They're trying to tempo you. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people be like blah blah blah, but like I'll still play 3 Flood Moss, so my deck is more that's good with the angers against them too. Prismari, I mean, yeah, probably one of the most underrated cards of all time, honestly. Maybe my favorite card of all time, I would say at this point. But the reason it's good, I mean, I could talk for 10 hours about it, but I will say it's gotten worse, but the reason it's good is that it's just like the best answer to her. So you can play like I went on Goldfish recently because I noticed like nobody's playing Prismari anymore. Like they're playing like two of Braids. Like 40% of decks play Hearth, so like your opponent's gonna cast Hearth against you. It seemed like the best answer to Hearth. The reason that it got worse, I would say, so I guess I'll start with that, is that usually like everybody played Rakdos mid range, and Prismari is obviously good against Rakdos mid range because it deals with Fable, and they usually play Bankbuster, and sometimes they have Harvester in. So like it's pretty obvious why Prismari is good against Rakdos, and also they try and beat you with discard. Like part of how they try and beat you is like cast discard spells and make your hand bad. So Prismari fights against that too. But a lot of like Mono Black got more popular now, and Prismari doesn't have that many targets against them. Like it only hits their whatever artifact, but it's not like a Braid that good against them either. So like yeah, it got worse in that way. Whereas like Prismari is like probably the best card you could sideboard against Rakdos, and it's probably not the best card you could sideboard against Mono Black. Also, like this list cares about Hearst a little bit less because of artist talent. Like if you have talent in play, you know Hearst, it's not bad against you, but you know talent gave you more counterplay to Hearst. Like it wasn't as before it was like much more difficult to beat. Now you have a bit more like counterplays with talent, and also you can find your destroy artifacts more easily with talent. But the reason I put 3 Prismari, I guess, I mean, there's a couple of things I would say. I mean, I think Prismari is just a much better card than a Braid. And like, if you think about Phoenix as a Storm deck, which I think you should think of it like a Storm or a combo deck, it's just like it's obvious why Prismari is much better in a Storm deck than a Braid because cantrips are extremely good in combo decks. Like the loot mode is just like insanely good in the deck. Like you're literally playing 4 Phoenix, 4 Cruise. Like it's just obvious like why if there's a Storm deck, it would rather have a interactive spell like cantrips than not. Because most of when you play combo deck, the game is like, do I assemble my combo or not? So like cards that cantrip to find your combo are good. It's like if you're playing Dredge, if your Nature's Claim also drew 2 cards, like discarded 2 cards, it would be way better than not, right? Like it's pretty obvious. I mean, I mean, and what else? Like, also, I think it's better against the mouse deck than people think if you actually like think about it. And also, like a lot of times when people talk about a Braid, I just don't find the arguments compelling at all. Like, people seem really obsessed with the Lightning Strike mode. It's like Lightning Strike's not a good card, so I don't know why you want that in your deck that badly. And what else was gonna say? I don't know. I just think Prismari is great. The reason to play 3 is that like I mean, I played against I was playing in the league was like I had 3, but I thought I had 2, and my opponent like discarded 1. I'm like, oh, I only have 1 in my deck now. It's like really hard to deal with Hearst. It's just like really good against Rakdos Demons if it's popular, and like yeah, the mouse deck also plays Hearst. I just want like I want to be able to draw it and like not have to be a headache if I already used it or if they discarded it or if I milled it. I just want access to a good amount of Prismaris. And also Prismari also is just way better. Like there's a lot of problematic artifacts in the format, like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, Reckoner, Bankbuster, whatever. The last thing is the Planeswalkers, I guess, which are more experimental. I haven't even cast them a single time, but the reason I added Narset was that I was thinking about the Demons matchup, and then I thought that the best thing you could sideboard for them actually was card advantage because your cards are actually very good against demons. Problem is just if you aren't able to cast them because you run out of cards because they discard them or whatever. Like to give more like illustration of that, I mean, I always say that like against the black mid range deck, like usually the most important thing. I mean, it's with the deck in general. Like usually the most important card in the deck is Treasure Cruise by a lot. And most of the games, like if you resolve Cruise, you win. If you don't, you lose. So like cards that play towards Cruise are like what I want to do. I mean, that's part of why I like Prismari. That's part of why I play Narset. Those are cards that are just gonna give me more ability to fight over my Treasure Cruise resolving. But like yeah, part of why I thought it's good against black mid range is I was like, people are like really scared of like Archfiend of the Dross or like unstoppable slasher cards like this, and it's not really easy to sideboard interaction for those cards. Like interaction's not very good. I mean, you could play Beacon Bolt or whatever, but Narset basically the thing about her is that she draws towards your interaction. Like your interaction's already good against them, but your interaction's bad when you don't have enough cards to make the efficiency matter. So like Narset's a card that like can do a Solitude impression or a Flame Tongue Kavu impression where you play her dig to your like into the Flood Maw, Lightning Axe, whatever. But also like you don't want too much interaction against them because then that actually can play into their game plan too. So she does a nice strike of like she lets you find your interaction more. She plays well with your interaction. And then also I thought like she might be good in other matchups because I'm like, yeah, she might be actually good in the mirror now because like everybody plays 4 talent. So like if you play her, it's actually like really good in the mid game, like better than it used to be. And like I don't know, people play other artist talent decks like Lotus Field. So and you could side it against control, I guess, or like actually the Beanstalk deck's like another thing, or the Incarnation deck. Like I said, it's probably kind of good against them. Like they play 4 Beanstalk. Um, it's kind of hard for them to remove her. She can also stop the blue Overlord if they play that. I mean, I don't know, like maybe they just play Zero and kill her every time, but it makes like they're also like trying to play control deck, like it's kind of good against their graveyard hate and their discard or whatever. Then and the idea for Jace was that I kind of wanted like a alternate win condition in my sideboard, and like all the creatures seem kind of bad to me. Um, especially like I kind of like I really wanted the anger for the green white deck. So like the main creature people play now is like third pass iconoclasts. My problem with that card is I think it actually plays against a lot of what you want to do in Phoenix, but like kind of in an unintuitive way. Because like I was saying that the cards in Phoenix are like much more efficient than other decks, but you kind of lose when you can't like use your cards properly. And I don't think third pass really helps with that issue because like basically what that means is like I think you're losing when you're flooding or when they have a hate card, and obviously third pass has quote unquote utility against a hate card. But there's a lot of reasons I was skeptical of it. I mean, one, it's obviously just like well, I would say historically the reason I never played Young Pyromancer in the deck was that Black mid range was always extremely popular, and I didn't think Young Pyromancer was good against Black mid range. I mean, they used to play Bone Crusher, and they would mostly win by making you run out of cards, right? But because people played Unstoppable Slasher, then I was like, oh, okay, I could see why you would want it because it's like kind of hard to interact with Slasher, so like you need to block it or whatever. Um, but it's not that it's not that insane. In fact, some people won't even say it's good. Also, like a lot of people were telling me like, oh, third path is really good against the mouse deck, and I was like, that seemed kind of get suspect to me because like they can literally just cast Ancestral Anger. I've also played the mouse deck in standard a lot, and like yeah, I don't think I would. I mean, it's like an okay card, but like what I would imagine third pass is good against is like them playing Hazoret and their Hearse and their Thoughtseize, but it's not like the thing about the mouse deck is that like if they untap with like Manifold or Emberheart or Heartfire or whatever, they can just kill you like very easily. So like I feel like that what I care about in the matchup is removing their mice, dealing with their engines, and third pass doesn't really deal with the engines and it plays badly with anger. And um I don't know. I'm also like have a bunch of Prismari, so I can grind with that against them. So yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on the sideboard, the deck. I guess that's basically everything for like the deck tech. Um, yeah. Oh yeah, I guess I should say I'll go over sideboarding. I mean, I could do it like this, or I can write it in the but that will be if people want to buy the guide, it's like $10 USD. I take moto tickets. Also, I do coaching. I mean, what the one thing I will say about Phoenix is that like I mean, it applies to Magic in general, but I think people would get like do better in tournaments. I mean, I guess this might sound kind of troll, but like or like silly to hear, but like if they spend more time on their technical play compared to the deck list, like I don't know. I just noticed that like I feel like I mean like how do you say this? Like I think if your deck is like serviceable, actually a lot of the minor things don't matter that much. Like it matters that you have like a coherent game plan that's like reasonable. But I think like once you hit a point it's reasonable, like you just get so much more value out of just actually playing well. And it's not that the deck building doesn't matter, but it's more that playing well is like much is like people just play very like not well. Like it's very hard to play very well, and like you just get like an insane amount of equity from playing better. Um, so like I feel like people probably spend too much time thinking about the deck list when it should be more on that. But obviously that's kind of troll to say. Like having coherent plans matters too. But like I guess what I would say is that like people are like very obviously stressed about getting good deck lists. You don't really see the obvious stress on the technical play. So yeah, that's what. So I do coaching, and it's like pretty cheap. It's like $30, $35 an hour usually. So anyway, that's the deck tech.